freedom, you can think of it in many ways. I believe that's how humans work best, and we want liberty both for individuals as well as groups of people. So in terms of what's in your own locus of control, self-custody I think is a great one. Not your keys, not your crypto. It's also like a mindset thing. Instead of just being a slave to technology, you take control. And that's the same thing with like open source and owning your data and keeping it private and so on. A lot of it I think is like literacy or education and like understanding that the technology we have today is very powerful. Let's start off with like synology proofs. You can prove any arbitrary statement without revealing anything but the fact that it's true. You can prove the thing that you care about and the thing that you actually want to communicate. You have a valid passport and you're above the age of 18, and that's all that matters. And this technology allows you to create proofs like that. It's a very, very useful building block in terms of how we create these trust minimized systems and how we can scale trust and removing reliance on trusted third parties and so on. We can trust the math as opposed to trusting humans or policies. It's a way of sort of scaling society, if you will. This type of mental model is not something that most people have because it's kind of new, kind of alien technology. People need to get used to. One thing I think was the Snowden revelations. It became kind of clear how these systems that we're using, people were like a little bit naive about it. Being able to securely communicate is very important. The conversation is private, and that's how I think humans evolved. If I talk to another person, the conversation stays between us. And that's just like a very natural first principles view. We were just trying to recreate that, but online. And the same thing goes for like private payments and stuff like that. So we're trying to onboard institutions onto Ethereum and making sure that their privacy requirements are met. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we want to upgrade the infrastructure that the world is running on. The alternative is that either we have these legacy systems or people build on these private chains, or we can get them to build on this open infrastructure. You have this kind of Wild West in terms of people just being able to do whatever they want on chain and cypherpunk and maximum self-sovereignty. And that's amazing. We want to keep that. But at the same time, we also want to have these other bubbles that are operating in some more regulated world. And I think they can coexist if we have a credibly neutral base layer.
All right, welcome back to 90 Seconds to Crypto, where we help off-chain Luddites become on-chain sovereigns. Every week here, we share the tools and mindsets to helping you unlock your digital sovereignty. Today, I'm here with my good friend Oskar, who is a fellow expatriate, Taiwanese onsen spiritual guide, tennis sparring partner, yes, Brazilian jiu-jitsu master. We're gonna call you master. And deep expert in zero-knowledge cryptography and research. So Oskar, would you like to make a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim, for having me on this. It's great to have this. Really, I think you've been doing a great job with all these videos and stuff. And we normally meet under different circumstances, but this is like a fun thing, yeah. So hi everyone, my name is Oskar. So I've been in the crypto and Ethereum space for close to a decade now, and focusing on synology proofs and programming cryptography for 5-6 years. A while back, I created an R&D organization called VAC, and as part of that, we created a peer-to-peer communication protocol called VACU, which has a focus on sort of being privacy preserving and running in resource-restricted environments. And we also did like a lot of protocol specifications and so on for secure messaging. And then as part of that, I sort of fell down the rabbit hole when it comes to synology proofs and programming cryptography and so on. And that's what I've been working on for the last 5-6 years or so. Doing a lot of things in that space. So everything from like tooling for making it easier to create proofs for mobile phones or folding schemes that are used in like CKVMs. Lately, I've also been advising PSC at EF when it comes to sort of strategy and focusing more on privacy on Ethereum.
What's the PSC?
So PSC is a group at EF, which stands for, it used to be the Privacy and Scaling Explorations Group, and now it's kind of Privacy Stewards of Ethereum. Basically, it's an R&D organization that's like playing out with all of this type of technology, comes to synology proofs and MPC and FSC and so on, and just pushing the envelope of what is possible, basically. Yeah, and then also lately, so I've also been writing a mini book on CK, sort of bridge the gap between sort of the CK pill world and the sort of more normal tech world. And then lately, the last few months, we've been doing this new thing, set up a new team, IPTF, Institutional Privacy Task Force, where we're basically trying to help institutions go on chain on Ethereum and making sure the privacy guarantees are met. So there's like a whole bunch of things that we can cover, and I don't know where you want to start.
Let's start hiking up this staircase first, and then we'll dig into it.
So what's good about this hike is that so people haven't been to Taiwan before. I think that goes for most of you. This is like basically in the city center. So we are like, you can take the subway here, and then this is, if you show the camera, maybe, or we see later. Yeah, so like it's just like a mountain that's like right in the middle of the city, and it connects to this mountain ridge, and it's like a very easy, accessible hike. It's quite popular in the beginning, but then sort of there's all this Taipei surrounded by all these mountains, so it's like a very nice break from city life.
I see. Nice. How many minutes are we going up here?
I think it's like 20 minutes up, and then it goes on for many hours, depending on how deep.
Many hours.
If you want to, we'll see. We'll probably not go that far.
We might be doing an overnight hike today. We're at the trailhead, and let's start hiking.
Let's do it.
You are an honorary Taiwanese citizen, like I am.
Yeah, well, permanent residence. Yes.
Yeah, like you're an expat. You've been here for the better half of the past decade, I want to say.
Yeah, 7-8 years or so.
What is it about Taiwan that drew you here? And is there some sort of special like Ethereum or like crypto magic sprinkled here in this land that keeps you more productive and making you choose Taiwan to base yourself out of rather than any other country in Asia or even Europe?
So I'm originally from Sweden. In a previous life, I was doing this whole digital nomad thing and sort of working and remotely and going to all these different countries in Europe and Asia. And I spent a few months in Taiwan and I really kind of enjoyed it and decided to come back. And I think one thing that's different and special with Taiwan is that it feels like very homey. I think in a lot of other places in Asia, you're like very easy to be more like kind of tourist, if you will. But
feels like home.
Yeah, it's very homey and there's like has a lot of nice qualities, kind of underrated.
Like what?
People are very nice. It's very sort of modern and convenient. A great food. And it's like a nice, vibrant city life, but also have these kind of hikes. And then it's also, because it's like a new country, you have this kind of civic awareness that you don't see everywhere. So that's also very nice.
Civic awareness.
Yes.
Do say more. What do you mean by that?
So I would say, like in Europe, a lot of people take things like institutions or democracy or rule of law or like freedom and so on as a kind of, it's a bit static and this is a kind of status quo that exists. But I think because of the history of Taiwan, it's kind of more alive and more vibrant because there's been so many changes the last few decades.
Oh, okay. Oskar is making a mandate that we're going to climb faster and quicker so that things will be more calm up there. But you didn't answer one part of my last question, which is there some special Ethereum or crypto magic sprinkled in Taiwan that makes it extra special for you to be doing your crypto work in Taiwan, sir?
It's a very strong sort of R&D community here. It's not always visible from the outside. Both when it comes to sort of Ethereum and a lot of the core research are based here, as well as sort of kind of signal-proof community there and programming cryptography. So we also have like meetups here. It's been going on for many, many years. A lot of this is kind of under the radar a little bit. So you obviously have this kind of more noisy trading degen stuff going on. But then under the surface, you also have this kind of core group of people that are still doing good shit and want to meet other people. I think it's kind of related to the culture here where people are like heavy research and engineering connection. Yeah. And people just being curious and being open to building on these kind of new technologies and so on.
I have sensed this too. I went to Taipei Blockchain Week like, I think a few months ago. I think it would happen in the summer, in September. And it was just a lot of that degen culture that you and I are probably not the biggest fans of. Yeah. But then on the underbelly of all of it, like you have this amazing community of like really, really intelligent researchers and engineers. And yeah, I just, the juxtaposition is just very unique.
Yeah. And I think just going back to what I said before about society and so on, I think that because it is a new country and people, it's more a live thing because it's different if like people in their 30s, 40s were part of making Taiwan or what it is today. That's very different from maybe other developed countries where the institutions that were created and everything they rely on was like created several hundred years ago. Right. So I think that also means that people are more amenable to these kind of new technologies and so on. Oh. And you see similar things in like Latin America and so on, where there's maybe like some lack of trust in certain institutions. Yes. And it means that people are more open to experimenting and building with this technology.
Good answer there. Yeah, good stuff. To be honest, I wasn't sure if the weather was going to hold up because it's been raining for like a whole week.
It's been raining for a week or so. So, but today it's better.
It looked super promising with the sun out this morning. Yes. And then now I think it's still doing a little bit of that drizzle action.
A little bit, but it's all right.
So how often do you come here?
Well, to be honest, this place not that often because it's a bit too popular, too many people. But
it's like the classic, like friends come over, you'll bring them here kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's just very easy and like accessible and nice views over the city and so on. But a lot of really good hikes around Taipei and in Taiwan overall. So,
what's your favorite hike? That's not this one.
I can't give that away, man.
Oh, you can't give that away on fucking camera.
No, I'm kidding.
This motherfucker.
No, but there are a lot because the mountains are connected, so you can easily get from one place to another. So there's like a lot of good places. You just start walking and then you end up somewhere nice often. The reason we're a bit out of breath, by the way, is because it's like stairs. It's just straight up. Yeah. It'll get better soon.
All stairs. Okay.
You sit here?
Yeah.
Sit next to me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, buddy, old pal. Okay. All right. It's not too tight of a squeeze, is it for you?
Oh, this is good.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Perfect. All right, so you are, amongst many people, one of the foremost experts on zero-knowledge cryptography and research. Do you mind explaining to our audiences here what the fuck is zero-knowledge briefly?
Sure. I would definitely not say I'm one of the foremost. Actually, there's a lot of people who know like a lot more about this than I do.
To be fair, like you've written a lot of blogs, you've written a lot of
books. What I've tried to do is like maybe bridge the gap a little bit, exploring different parts of the space and trying to bridge the gap between sort of the CK pill world and the sort of more normal tech world, if you will.
The ZK pilled?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is basically, let's start off with like zero-knowledge proofs. So basically what it allows you to do is that you can prove any arbitrary statement without revealing anything but the fact that it's true. And it's very, very powerful. So like, for example, if you have a passport or something like that, you can prove that you're above the age of 18, but like revealing nothing else. So like normally, if you, let's say you try to enter a bar or something, you would give sort of the guard like your ID, and you might have personal information there, like your full name or your address or something like that. And that's not necessarily information you want that person to have. And like even beyond that, like say you do some kind of KYC thing online, you have to scan your passport or these types of things. And
scary.
That's a big problem in general, but what's not true is basically you can prove the thing that you care about and the thing that you actually want to communicate. So in this case, what you want to communicate is you just want to show that you have a valid passport and you're above the age of 18. And that's all that matters. And that's really all that should be communicated. And this technology allows you to create proofs like that and use it as a building block. So it's a very, very powerful primitive. It's kind of magical in the sense that like, how is this even possible? And it's also magical in terms of how useful it is. So because not only can you prove sort of anything and sort of choose what information you reveal, that's kind of a zero-knowledge property, you can also do so in a very, very small space. So like you can compress something down. And this is very useful in lots of applications. So for example, if you're in blockchain, and one big problem is that it's only held sort of limited space. So you want to find like ways of increasing sort of throughput and decreasing cost and solving sort of scalability in general. And one way you can do that is with zero-knowledge proofs, because you can basically prove that each state transition has happened correctly. And the proof for that is like constant size, it's succinct. So no matter if you have like 1 transaction or 100 transactions or a million transactions, the proof that they were all validly executed all fits in the same space. So that's kind of a crazy property. You kind of create this succinct proof, and then you can put it on a blockchain and so on. So it's a very, very powerful technology, and it's kind of magical because it's how is this even possible? And
moon math.
Yeah. It's a very, very useful building block in terms of how we create these kind of trust minimized systems and how we can scale trust and removing the the reliance on trusted third parties and so on.
Trusted third parties are security holes, according to Nick Szabo.
Indeed, yes.
Why is zero-knowledge technology especially like exciting for crypto and for the tech world at large? I guess you kind of answered that already.
No, but it's a good question. So I think, and also the reason, like this is kind of fairly new applied cryptography. Like usually when you get new tools like this, it takes like a long time for it to get adoption and funding and so on. But I think with the blockchain space, there's kind of a very nice symbiosis going on. And the reason for that is because blockchains like Ethereum and so on, they have a specific strengths, right? Like it's transparent, which is very useful. You can it's auditable and verifiable and so on. And it's also sensor persistent. So you have all these copies in the world and like even if you attack one single node, that doesn't sort of change the integrity of the chain. But obviously that has downsides. And I think what zero-knowledge proofs do is they complement very nicely, because you get, instead of transparency, you actually get privacy. So you don't want everything to be transparent. So you can get this privacy property. And the other side of it, like sensor persistence, that requires like having limited space. Like you can only have a certain block size because you need to keep all these copies and it needs to propagate in this network and so on. And by having this succinctness property, we can make the best use of that limited space we have and make it as useful as possible, basically.
Wow.
So they are very complementary technologies, I would say.
What's the most exciting, in your opinion, thing that's happening in zero knowledge right now?
Yeah, so just going briefly back to when I mentioned the CK pilled aspect, it's a very different kind of mental model. And CK is just one of these technologies. Like there's a lot of other types of technologies that all are under this umbrella of like programmable cryptography, if you will. And it's the kind of mental model in terms of how you build systems, because traditionally in the web world and so on, you build up these databases and you trust these companies to safeguard your data and so on. And there's like a lot of assumptions. So like in a well-regulated society or system, this works fine because you have like rule of law and you can sort of, if you sign a contract, you know what it says will happen. But there's like a lot of edge cases. And if something goes wrong, it kind of propagates. And in this world we live in, where sort of everyone is, you're from Canada, I'm from Sweden, we're in Taiwan, this is all online and so on, and outside of sort of normal jurisdictional boundaries, it becomes very, very hard to reason about them. It's like sort of knowing who do you trust and why do you trust them, and even thinking about that is very, very difficult. And what this type of technology allows us to do is that we can trust the math as opposed to trusting humans or policies. And it's a very, very powerful concept because it's a way of sort of scaling society, if you will, and doing more things with sort of these more basic, more reliable kind of building blocks. So yeah, just a bit of a tangent there, but just in terms of how to think about this. And I think this type of mental model is not something that most people have because it's kind of new, kind of alien technology, and it takes a while for people to like understand how new technology, like when computers came to life and then internet and so on, and now AI. Like anytime a new technology comes online, it's kind of people need to get used to it, and it's like develop new mental. Yeah, it's like a skill problem and like a literacy problem, and just need to get used to it.
If people were interested in testing out this new alien technology, like what are some apps, what are some use cases you would recommend people to check out that is in the realm of zero knowledge or programmable cryptography?
There's many, and I probably forget a bunch, but like a few.
Your most exciting, like.
No, so I think what basic one is like private money. I think that's like a very simple and key one. That's kind of the origin of it's not proof. So with things like Zcash, and the basic idea, right, is that when you have something like cash and you pay for coffee, you sort of don't get the history of that whole, where that bill has been and so on, like, or your paycheck or anything like that. You just pay for a transaction and for a coffee or whatever, and that's it. While public blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're great, but they have this problem that is kind of transparent. So like if you get some income or you have some assets, that's kind of follows you around forever, and it's kind of a big problem in terms of just security and so on. So just having this like fungibility property where there's no difference between one ETH versus another ETH or what have you, that's like a very core, very useful property to have. And one way to get that, one of the best ways to get that, is through zero-knowledge proofs. And that's how it works, for example, in Zcash. And you can get similar things in Ethereum with sort of things like previously Cash, but now Railgun. You've done an episode there before.
Yeah, shout out to Alan and Railgun.
Yes, indeed. Privacy pools and so on. So yeah, I think you've had a few of these on your channel already. So those are good examples. So I think that's like a big class of products in this space because it's like a very simple way, relatively speaking, sort of get this kind of private moneyware aspect where you sort of can't see the transaction trace and so on. Another class of applications are interesting when it comes to like private identity, if you will. So oftentimes now you have to identify yourself for various reasons. So if some kind of KYC process, or maybe it's a kind of Sybil resistance thing where you want to make it expensive for people to create accounts on Twitter or whatnot. And current solutions are not necessarily great because they sort of require us to give up all of this data and hack and information. Yeah, there's like a lot of problems with it, right? And
can I just add to what you're saying there? Recently, 90 Seconds of Crypto was accepted for the Gitcoin grants round, privacy round 24. And in order to vote, thank you. In order to vote, though, you have to mint a Gitcoin passport, which requires you to do privacy-preserving KYC. Actually, I'm not going to talk shit about Gitcoin here, but they require you to do privacy-preserving KYC. Yeah. And, like, I don't know exactly how privacy-preserving it is. I don't know if it uses zero knowledge. So, like, there's
aspects of it that are used to zero, yes.
Oh, really? It does? Okay. I wasn't aware. It looked like it was just some, like, Web2 company, like, founded in SF that was doing the KYC process.
It's been a while since I looked at it specifically. I do think there are certain components there that, like, using CKB, But it's like a mix of factors, I think.
I see.
Yeah, so this like a bunch, and for context, like with Gitcoin Passport, it's like trying to take all of these factors, like on-chain activity and like ID and GitHub activity and so on, and
to prove unique humanity.
Yeah, basically, exactly. Yeah. But in terms of like as a building block and these products, there's a lot of secret identity solutions. So there's like things that are built on your passport, like Open Passport. There's Rarimo, for example, and what they do is they allow you to sort of prove that you have a certain passport in this case. And that's very useful. And one example is Rarimo. It was used in like 3 different jurisdictions. So it was used in Ukraine, Georgia, and Russia. And like a lot of things have changed geopolitically there, obviously. But what's interesting about that, I think, is that the same technology is being used in 3 very, very different places. So in the case of Ukraine, it's like more symbiotic, if you will. Like there's like collaboration and so on. In the case of Georgia, I think it was used for things like liquid democracy. This is a few years ago. And then in the case of Russia, it's obviously a bit more adversarial, but it was still able to use the same kind of technology to have kind of like some separate election and stuff like that. So it's things like that. It's also SUPAS that's used in some, or used to be used at least in some crypto conferences. There's a bunch of like general like CK identity products and various collaborations with governments where basically people want some notion of identity or multiple notions of identity ideally, and you want to maintain these kind of privacy properties around it so you don't sort of leak identities, but you can still use it as a building block for example, cyber resistance and stuff like that. Third one, I think is like when it comes to like, so I think you have had CKPTP before. I think that's like a great example as well.
Great product. Check out that video.
Yes, check it out. Link in the bio description. No, thumbnail up here. Yes. Up here somewhere. And that's very cool because it allows you to sort of do this peer-to-peer on and off ramping. And it's done in a very permissionless way, right? So it's using CK email as a building block, so you can prove that you've received a certain email. And that in itself is like a super powerful primitive. You can prove that you've received like a plane ticket or a conference or whatnot, or that you belong to certain organization and so on. And also things even more powerful like TLS Notary, and there's a lot of other CK TLS products.
That shit is so cool.
It's really cool, and it basically allows you to prove that some data is authenticated, basically. So if you have, say, your bank account, you can use it to prove that you have a certain amount and then potentially apply for a loan in some other system and so on. So a lot of this is still fairly early, but like in the case of CKPTP, it's like live and people are it's like real money and it's audited and all of these things. But I think that's a very exciting area as well, where we just scratch the surface. And then there's like a lot of other things, like obviously it's used for scaling. It's a very useful thing because as more and more people want to come on chain, you need to make things more scalable, you need to have sort of higher throughput and just cheaper transactions and so on, while still having these kind of strong security guarantees that we want. And then there's even more, there's like a lot of institutional use cases as well that are very interesting. We can talk more about that later as well. Yeah. It's useful in lots of various contexts, and we just see more and more, especially as the technology matures and people wrap their head around like how to use this technology and build new fundamental building blocks.
And wrap their heads around just how impactful this type of technology really is. So in your opinion, what is the moment when the scale will just tip over and then zero knowledge will just become everything everywhere all at once, and people won't even have to think about it, and underneath everything that they do on their phones or on their computers is just all zero knowledge stuff?
Yeah, I think it will happen sort of gradually. I think it's already happening. Like you mentioned, for example, Git Compass, but now there's like some kinks to work out, but like there are some CK there, right? And we didn't. That's one example, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it comes down to UX, and there's obviously like hard technological challenges to make it performant enough to be useful and so on. But for a lot of applications, we're already there, and it's more about sort of the final touches and like various products finding product market fit and so on. But like I'll give one example. So this is more from the Zcash world, but they have this wallet called Zashi, and
shout out Zashi.
And they make this mobile wallet, and it's really cool because it sort of has Tor built in from scratch for sort of private networking. You sort of don't leak things to Infer or Etherscan and so on. At least not as much. And then also it encourages you to shield your assets. So sort of putting them in this kind of private pool of money. And it's very, very easy to do. It's literally just like a button, like your money is not safe. Click a button, and you click a button, and then they do it for you. And that type of UX, I think, is great. And I think we'll see more and more of that, especially as people feel like they can trust this technology and wallets start to integrate it. So like there's a product at EF, for example, called Kohaku that's like trying to push the envelope on some of these things. And integrating stuff like privacy pools or railgun and stealth addresses sort of as default. So it's not something you have to go out of your way, but it's just something that's there. Right. And I think we'll keep seeing that more and more, starting more from the crypto space, but then also specific institutional deployments and then more and more in other scenarios.
So it sounds like you're saying that it's already happening.
It's already happening,
and it's just sort of snaking its way throughout the technology world.
Yeah, and you see this like Cloudflare is already doing some experience with this, and Google as well, and Signal.
Google is doing some
so there's like,
stuff, right?
People are doing it and in different areas, and it's just like recently I saw an announcement for like a camera that were doing this.
Yes, the Rock camera, right? Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Like, what is the Rock camera? Maybe just briefly.
So the Rock camera, like initially was just an idea in terms of like a big problem is in terms of fake data and so on, and people
AI slop.
Yeah, AI slop, like people taking a picture and then kind of modifying it or just generating and fake news, like figuring out like what is real. And it's like a balance, right? Because you don't want to censor stuff, but at the same time you want to be able to trust things. So if you see a picture, how do you know if it's real? And one idea that's been around for a while and that has recently become more and more of a reality is like that you can create a signature for a photo and attach it to a photo. And then you can basically create a proof saying like, okay, this picture was actually taken by a real camera. And you can even go further.
That's crazy, yeah, it's so cool. Balaji talked about this like before, I feel like.
Yes, it's been floating around for a while and now it's becoming it's reality basically. And another example of this is, so Reuters, they have these standards for what are like allowed transformations. So for example, when you have an image, let's say from a conflict zone or whatnot, you can crop it and you can like grayscale it and like a few other things that you can do that's like not seen as like changing the picture, the semantics of the picture, but still like representing reality.
Right.
And that's like a custom, it's like a policy that people have, that like good journalists have, but it's hard to know if that's the case or not. But with this technology, you can sort of prove that a photo was taken from a real camera and it has only undergone certain transformations, right? So you can see, if you see a picture on Twitter, you can imagine in the future, or Podcaster, you can imagine in the future that you can like see, oh, actually, there's like a kind of proof going back to this picture was taken last week, and it's not something from 3 years ago where someone added like this hellscape that's just like fake news, right?
And generated like a bunch of like this background here, and then this like gun here was generated, and
exactly.
So that's wild, man.
This,
like
stuff like that.
And like, could that theoretically be put into an iPhone camera or like any type of camera?
Yeah, definitely. And like obviously there's some trust assumptions, right? Because you can always, you can modify the camera and hardware and stuff and this hacks. But I think what the goal is not to make it like zero trust, but you kind of like trust minimization, which is also what you mentioned Nick Szabo before.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, right? Because if you have, I don't know, some crazy solar flares or quantum computing and so on, like you can always construct these scenarios where nothing works, you can't trust anything. But what we're trying to do is like minimize the trust requirements and sort of reduce the surface area where things can go wrong. And then it just becomes easier to reason about things. So if you see something, like, okay, I'm reasonably certain that this is the case, and so on. So it's more about making easier to reason about things.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow, great, thank you. That rock camera, that's definitely something worth checking out. But we've sat here for a bit. Like, shall we continue and check out the rest of the hike? Because I'm also getting eaten alive by mosquitoes here.
Mosquitoes here. We have to keep moving.
All right, let's do this. So, Oskar, my friend, you have written this amazing little resource called A Friendly Beginner's Guide to Zero Knowledge.
Yeah, friendly introducing knowledge proofs, yes.
That's it. And you've given it out at DevCon and DevConnect. And I just find it a wonderful resource. Like, it's superbly well written, not too technical. Why did you decide to write it?
I think education is very important, and being in the space for a while and kind of getting into the space with knowledge proofs by accident a little bit, I noticed there's like a very big gap between how researchers and engineers and thinkers in the space think about this technology and the systems we can build, and like the rest of the tech universe, if you will. So even if you're like a amazing engineer at Google or something, you might not think about how to design the systems in the same way. And I think there's like a massive gap there. And I think that gap is very interesting. So I basically want to write a book or a series of booklets that tries to bridge these gaps and write it like for different audiences. So the first is like basically 3 booklets, and I've been printing them out and giving them out at various conferences and stuff.
Great little swag. Find Oskar and ask him for one of these books when you're at DevConnect or DevCon.
And the first one's like a general introduction, like explaining what they are and why it's possible and so on, but like generally for like a lay audience. But I'm not trying to simplify things too much either. Like it's kind of going deep, and the idea is that like if you read it, you should have like a very good understanding of the technology. And the second one is aimed more towards people who are like programmers, so maybe they know a few programming languages, but they want to sort of code this stuff and understand how to actually build things. And then the third one is more like understanding the math, it's understanding how this is even possible, mathematically speaking. So it's kind of like this fractal approach where you can choose which aspects you're curious about. For example, if you're an engineer, you should be able to go just reading the first one and then the second one to know how to program stuff. And then let's say you got like a STEM degree, so you graduated like in mechanical engineering, whatever, like a decade ago. You should still be able to pick up and understand the math, so you actually understand how this mathematics is possible. Yeah, that's like kind of the general goal, and we've been using it at various like workshops and stuff for university students that sort of are curious about this technology. We've also translated it with some volunteer help to Chinese and Spanish as well. So it's kind of this kind of grassroots product. I paused a little bit recently, but like the original free resources are still out there, and there's like booklets. Check it out. Yeah. Yes, and thanks to all the volunteers who helped translate those.
Shout out to the volunteers. Yes. So that's also available like on GitHub or something for free.
Yeah, right? zkintro.com.
zkintro.com.
Yeah.
Nice. How did you even become such a privacy conscious nutcase anyways?
Oh.
Sorry, I shouldn't say nutcase, but I mean, I consider myself a privacy conscious nutcase.
Yes,
So,
fair enough.
how did you fall down the rabbit hole of privacy? What made you interested in the first place? Why does it matter? Why do you need privacy if you have nothing to hide?
Yeah, indeed. I think it's just part of people who grew up on the internet and stuff. Wait, hold on. Let's find a place first.
We gotta overtake some people on the staircase. Oh, all good, baby. Okay. There's a Taipei 101 back there. This is a beautiful view. For those of you who have never been to Taipei, this is a great little hike.
Whoa. So yeah, it's a bit cloudy now, but
Oh yeah.
this is like a small resting platform.
Small resting platform. Or is this the top? No, this is not the top, right?
No. This is like a...
You wanna...
There you see Taipei 101.
There's a 101. How did you...
What's your question?
The privacy rabbit hole. Like you just said,
rabbit hole. Yeah.
yeah, you said like it was the internet.
No, I think a lot of people who grew up on the internet and stuff, they sort of expectations like it's a very free space of like exploration and stuff. And I think there was like a lot of things, but one thing I think was the Snowden revelations back in 2013 when it became kind of clear how these systems that we were using, they were kind of, people were like a little bit naive about it.
Like you mean like Edward Snowden leaking the fact that the US government was performing mass surveillance on American
basically,
citizens.
and there was like a lot of things related to that. I think that was definitely one. There were many other things. So I think that's an aspect, and I think just being able to securely communicate is very important. Like when we have a conversation now, well, not this one because it's going to be on YouTube, but when we shut off the camera later, the conversation is kind of private, and that's how I think humans evolved and how we should think about things. And internet is great in that it gives us the ability to talk across the world, but we still want to have this kind of same dynamic where if I talk to another person or a group of people, the conversation stays between us, and it's not something that's spread more widely. And I think that's just like a very natural first principles view of looking at things. And we were basically just trying to recreate that, but online. And the same thing goes for like private payments and stuff like that. And I think it's also like, especially people who don't understand how these systems work or how data is being misused and stuff. I think it's hard to understand just how important it is, just in terms of how it impacts people's lives and stuff. And especially now with AI and how marketing agencies are using sort of your data and sort of manipulating people to do certain things and stuff. If you pay attention, it's like a very important property to have to sort of live life freely. Yeah. You want to sit next to me?
No, it's a bit too tight. So I'll just do one of these. Like, you were saying earlier in your introduction that you used to work at VAC, and then you did also work at WACU, which is the peer-to-peer zero-knowledge messaging protocol.
Yeah, it's like a peer-to-peer communication protocol.
It's not zero-knowledge.
No, but it's using zero-knowledge as well, and it's off-chain. So, I mean, it's a lot of things I could say about this. I guess it started off like working on secure messaging, application called Status, and I think one thing we noticed is that the protocols that Ethereum provided us were like not sufficient. So we started going deeper into like protocol research and like actually describing the protocols, not just like as a piece of code, but in terms of what the protocol does, what security properties it has, and basically creating specifications so you can have multiple implementations. Kind of a bit like Ethereum has multiple client implementations as well. As part of that, we created VACU, and then it's basically like a peer-to-peer communication protocol. Back in the day, there used to be like with Ethereum, there was Ethereum for compute, and then Whisper for communication, and then Swarm for storage. That was like a long time ago. Only Ethereum sort of kept going at ETH, and then we basically took Whisper and turned it into VACU. And the team is still going strong. VACU is still around. It's being used by products like Railgun and the Graph and Portrait and stuff like that. And what we're trying to do is just make peer-to-peer work in like a privacy-preserving way, but also on resource-restricted environments. So from your browser and from your phone, without using kind of centralized gateways and stuff like that. And as part of that, we sort of got deeper into protocol specifications and actually describing like what are the problems we get and how do we compose these different protocols and so on. We also started using, that's how I got in touch with Barry Whitehead in the beginning, before, right around the time when he started PC, and he had these like crazy ideas of how to use this technology. And at first it was just like, oh, that sounds interesting, but I didn't quite understand how it worked. But as we dove deeper into it, then we did some experimentation and stuff. It became sort of from like this idea, a crazy idea, to something that's actually practical. And now it's being used in production. So Specifically, that was with RLN, which stands for Rate Limiting Nullifier, and it's a way to sort of get spam protection or Sybil resistance in a peer-to-peer network. So that's how I sort of got started with CK and stuff like that. But a big part of that was like thinking in terms of protocols and specifications first.
And how has it informed your sort of work on zero knowledge and privacy and cryptography nowadays?
I think one thing that's interesting about that as well is that it was more used in the privacy properties of zero knowledge proofs and not sort of the scalability properties. And it was also used in an off-chain context. And I think a lot of applications that are interesting are also happening off-chain. Like I think in terms of new ideas and so on, that's kind of a richer space to some extent. I think a big part of it is also in terms of just thinking in terms of protocols and specifications. I think there's like a lot of products in the space that they make some cool app or product or whatnot, and you can use it, but it's hard to understand how it actually works. And it's not always that different from like a Web 2 company where you can just shut it down. You don't really understand the security properties you have. So I think it's really important that if you're trying to create like a protocol, that you actually think about it as a protocol. And that means having like kind of like IETF standards, like HTTPS, like how internet was built up, that's actually what you're doing. You're creating these protocols and they have certain properties and you can have multiple implementations. And it's ultimately how you create sort of this modern infrastructure that survives, like Ethereum and all this CK tech and so on. It's not just like random products, it's like this fundamental infrastructures and standards that you can sort of analyze and that can survive the original operators of the application or product as you may have it.
Cool, great answer, thank you. That's the 101 right there.
That's the 101 right there.
So is this the top of the hike or no, there's still more to go?
Yeah, just by this specific, it's like a little bit top and then goes down a bit and then it keeps going. So basically Taipei is surrounded, it's like in a basin, so it's surrounded by mountains. And yeah, we're on one of the ridges.
I see. Yeah. But this is like where most people stop? Or?
Yeah, I think a lot of people stop here and then they go down because this is like where the stairs stop and so on. We'll keep going for a bit.
Instagram.
Yeah, this is the Instagram spot, right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you recently announced on Twitter that you recently joined the Institutional Privacy Task Force at the Ethereum Foundation, or the IPTF for short.
Yes.
Sounds fancy, sounds important. It sounds like you're completing tasks. Do you mind telling the audience like what the IPTF is for? What do you do there?
Yeah, so me and Mo, also from EF, we kind of kicked up IPTF like a few months ago now. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to onboard institutions onto Ethereum and making sure that their privacy requirements are met. It's both different and also interesting for a few reasons. First of all, one thing we're seeing is that, like, especially this year, more and more institutions, they want to build on public blockchains. And part of that is because of just like the technology and ecosystem maturing. And part of that is also the fact that there's like more regulatory clarity, whether that's in the US or Europe or Singapore or whatnot, or Japan with various types of regulations and so on. And that just makes it easy for these institutions to even like start to think about it. But a big problem when it comes to moving onto public blockchain system is in terms of sort of making sure that their privacy requirements are met, because what they are used to, they're very sophisticated in terms of their business operations. So do some kind of trading or payment flows and whatnot. It's like very, very complex, but it's like a completely different world. And it's built up on these kind of legacy systems. And they would like to move things on chain for various reasons in terms of like transparency and like better settlement and like access to liquidity and more affordances and so on. But like a big blocker that we hear over and over again is just in terms of privacy. Like they want to move on chain, but they also want things to be private. And it's interesting because it's like the technology need is very similar to the ones that we have been working on for a long time, but it's like less cypherpunk in nature, if you will. It's less like sovereign individual, you know, fuck the state kind of thing, and more like we want to make money and like we don't want our competitors to see our secrets.
That message doesn't quite take with the big institutions.
Yeah, exactly. But the tools they want is very similar, right?
Yes.
And I think with Ethereum being this kind of credibility neutral base layer and a lot of this technology being very flexible, we can basically allow for these both sort of these kind of hardcore cypherpunks and also these institutions to both build on top of Ethereum with like some differences, but like a lot of overlap as well in terms of what they need. So what we're trying to do is first of all talk to them, so talking to these big institutions and understanding like what they need and like what the requirements are and what the problems are, how they're thinking about this, and just understanding like the business use case. And then basically looking in the ecosystem and talking to various vendors in the space, as well as looking at ERCs that exist, so various specifications and so on, and seeing kind of what the solution space is, and then trying to map the demand, the problem space to sort of the solution space and bridge that gap and like create these kind of feedback loops. Because there's obviously like a lot of work that's already been done, and just surfacing that, like you can use this technology for this specific problem, but also in terms of maybe overlooked problems. So there might be some specific things that don't exist that is blocking institutions from like getting on chain and stuff. So that's basically what we're trying to do. We're just trying to create these feedback loops and ultimately get institutions to build on top of Ethereum.
Can you give the audience a preview of some of the institutions that you might be working with or collaborating with?
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult because like a lot of the reason institutions come to us is because they trust the Ethereum Foundation, and then we can sort of be credibly neutral. So it's hard, and they also want to be able to talk to us without sort of making a big press release or whatever. So unfortunately, I can't talk about specifics, but it's like one of
it's
NDAs, yeah. But they're some of the biggest institutions in the world, basically, and a lot of them they do want to eventually become more public about it. But what we see is that a lot of the use cases are very similar. So it's things like stable coins or some kind of payments. It's things like real world assets and things like structured products like bonds and whatnot. And these are like massive, massive markets, right? Like 100 times or 1,000 times bigger in terms of monetary flows than what we have on Ethereum today. So what's interesting is that like what's happening is that maybe TradFi is moving more into the DeFi space and sort of want to build on this public infrastructure. And then it varies a lot. Like there's a lot of specifics involved because depending on what jurisdiction we're talking about, the regulation is different and the requirements are different. For example, if you do payments between just like a handful of banks with like multiple millions of dollars, that's very different from like issuing some kind of stable coin that's meant for retail customers. So they're both like state payments and whatnot, but they are very, very different in terms of the solutions and requirements involved and stuff like that. Even though a lot of this is like confidential and so on, what we want to do is we want to make as much as possible open source. So what we are doing is we are extracting these answers and creating this kind of public market map. That's a public good, and that's something we're working with the ecosystem with. So it's an open source repo, and in it we sort of basically take and synthesize what we talk to these institutions about into use cases and explain like what are the requirements, who are the actors, what performance targets do they need, and so on, and explaining kind of the relevant jurisdictions or regulations that apply. And then trying to map that basically in terms of approaches, so how you would pick certain vendors or specifications to ultimately solve your problem. And that's something that we need help from the ecosystem in terms of, because we know some stuff, but we don't know everything. And the Ethereum and the privacy ecosystem is large, so it's super useful. People come in with their own expertise and sort of help us build out this public good, because then we can sort of get people on board onto Ethereum, and people who work in their products, they can also make sure that they're solving the right problem, because it might be hard for them to talk to some of these biggest banks in the world, but we can sort of tell them a little bit about like, here's what they actually need to move the needle. And that can also inform people in terms of what products they choose to work on and so on.
And do these institutions sort of like vary across the world? Like, are you talking to American institutions, European institutions, Asian?
It's a mix. Yeah, it's a mix from like America, Europe, Asia, if it's Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, and so on. And they also vary a lot in terms of sophistication. So most of them are very sophisticated in terms of the business operation. And then some of them, they have had like a crypto R&D lab with 20 people who've been working on this, and they have like built their own sort of POCs and reports and ERCs and so on, whereas others are sort of just dipping their nose in. So it's kind of like a separate world, and we're just trying to sort of bridge that gap.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And so all the work that you're doing at the IPTF, how might users expect to see their experience of being on chain, using crypto products change meaningfully?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think ultimately what we're trying to do is we want to sort of upgrade the infrastructure that sort of the world is running on, and this is like part of it. In terms of the alternative is that either we have these legacy systems or people build on these like private chains, or we can sort of get them to build on this open infrastructure and getting these properties that we like, right? Like we want to have self-custody, we want to have privacy, we want to have like ability to move our assets between different protocols, and we want it to be private and secure and open source and all of these things, right? So that's what we're building towards and trying to. And that's also what a lot of these institutions want. They just operate in a different framework. So ultimately, that will allow, instead of using these kind of legacy platforms and so on, you can sort of use on-chain products and still get access to maybe it's like bonds or stocks or some real-world assets, or maybe being able to pay your rent for some stable coin or what have you, but doing so in a private way. Right. So I think that's kind of how things are moving. But a lot of it is like initially targeted towards institutions, and then it's ultimately up to what service they want to provide. But I think the way I see it is you have this kind of Wild West that still exists and is amazing in terms of people just being able to do whatever they want on chain, and cypherpunk and people like maximum self-sovereignty. And that's amazing. We want to keep that. But at the same time, we also want to have these kind of other bubbles that are maybe operating in some kind of more regulated world. And I think they can coexist if you have a credibly neutral base layer. And basically what you have then is you have competition. And you already see that in the real world where you have different jurisdictions that are competing against each other in terms of providing the best services for either companies or for individuals. So I think we will see like similar things going on in the crypto space.
Very cool. If you were to judge the progress meter, like between like adoption or like where you see crypto is at right now and where the ideal state is, the 100% of Ethereum everywhere, crypto everywhere, like institutions on chain, privacy is fixed, like based on the work that you've been doing with the institutions, based on your own zero knowledge research and, you know, informing products and protocols, what percentage do you think we are at towards that ideal state?
I don't know. That's a hard question, man. I think it's like it's tough. It's very uneven, right? Because I think for some people they might feel like they're almost there, like they have a workflow for doing their on-chain transactions privately, and like some people are very, very sophisticated now already, so they would be like close to 80%. But then the fact is like most people are nowhere near that, and most institutions are nowhere near that, so it would be like 5%.
5%.
So like, what's the average? No, like so I don't know what the average is. Is it hard? 30%? I think it's like organic process, right? Where you have like this alternative parallel system and it's kind of too big to ignore. So now you have these like incumbents that are like, okay, we can't ignore this anymore. Like we can't fight this. So we have to figure out how to live with it or interact with it. And I think that's what we see happening now. Yeah, we're talking about institutions. Like I think a lot of them, they have stable coins and they have these real world assets, but a big blocker is in terms of actually making it private because they realize that it doesn't really work for their use cases if it's not actually private. So that's a big blocker. And like the fact that there's some regulatory clarity is very useful for those institutions in terms of how they operate. I think there's like a lot of other parallel things going on. So as I mentioned about like being CKPL before, that also goes for like legislator rights. And goes back to the whole idea of like network states and these types of ideas where you're not just like using existing legal frameworks, but you're trying to sort of create new policy and new legal frameworks that are more well-informed of how the technology actually works. And even creating these like parallel societies that can sort of compete with existing societies. So I think you will see all kinds of, like from the crypto anarchist hardcore taking over like a boat in the middle of nowhere and just doing your own thing, all the way to like the most boring kind of TradFi, New York, whatever thing you can imagine, like everything in between, right? And it will have these feedback loops and ultimately, hopefully, the systems we build are better for it and people are better off.
That last answer was a good segue actually to my next question, which is you were talking about the cypherpunk, like crypto anarchist, like freedom maxi. And so I just wanted to note that on your Twitter bio, the first two words in it is freedom maxi. And yeah, that's everything that I love about the space. This what this channel is all about, self-custodial technology, privacy, sovereignty.
Yes.
And so if you were to give the audience a starter kit, what might be some technology or gadgets or mindsets or tools that you could recommend for someone getting started in their freedom maxi journey? Ooh. So top 3.
Freedom, you can think of it in many ways. Like I think you can talk about like economic freedom, you can talk about political freedom, you can talk about social freedom, and like they're all important. And I think it's more like a kind of North Star in terms of, I believe that's how sort of humans work best. And we want liberty both for individuals as well as groups of people. And then it can apply in different ways in terms of sort of what's in your own locus of sphere of control. I guess like self-custody, I think is a great one in terms of just like not your keys, not your Bitcoin, not your crypto. Like that's a very basic thing. And I think it's also like a mindset thing where instead of just being a slave to technology, you sort of take control. And that's the same thing with like open source and owning your data and keeping it private and so on. So like a lot of it, I think, is like in terms of also literacy or education and like understanding that the technology we have today is like very, very powerful. And like the phones that we have or the information we consume, it's not that different no matter sort of where you come from in the world, no matter if you're like the richest person in the world or you're in the middle of nowhere in Africa or Latin America or Asia or what have you, you still have roughly the same technology and same possibility in terms of information if you sort of have the skills, if it's like comes to English or when it comes to like programming or technology and all of these things. So I think that's like an important mindset thing and that the fact that you can have self-custody and control your own assets and control your own communication and data and so on, that's massive. And then also like just, I guess, in terms of thinking that the world is like a big place and we're very fortunate that we can just travel freely and work on this technology that's like across boundaries and stuff. And that's not something that was the case like 50 or 100 years from now. So like we have a Canadian here and a Swedish person and we're in Taiwan and we're shooting this video for the internet. And I think just like taking advantage of that and looking beyond the horizon and you can always like move and go other places and you can use different jurisdictions to your advantage and stuff like that. That's another thing. A third thing, I guess, is like also in terms of judgment. There's like a lot of AI and fake news and stuff like that and powerful forces that it's like propaganda and all kinds of things. And I think just being able to think critically and sort of not just take AI slop as like the gospel, but just thinking critically and understanding how to thinking deeply about like trust and like who do you trust and what do you trust and like why, and like reading and understanding how powers work and stuff. I think that's like a more general thing, but I think it's important to not just be, there's like this quote of like program and be programmed, and I think you do want to understand how things operate and kind of educate yourself to be able to guard against like various type of more social things that are going on as well.
Self-custody, location optionality, and judgment. That's the starter kit. That's a beautiful starter kit, and something anyone can start researching and look up resources for, and just start acquiring some freedom in your pores and in your veins.
And I think it's also very, and we talked about this in the beginning, like in terms of one thing I appreciate about Taiwan is that sort of not taking these things for granted. And I think it's a case for a lot of people around the world, where I talk to a lot of people who come from, I don't know if it's like Argentina or Vietnam or what have you, they're just sort of more up and coming, and sort of people are very hungry, and they kind of understand a lot of the core value proposition of crypto a lot better than people from the developed world, like developed world. I don't know why I use that word anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. But like from Europe or what have you, where people are like a bit more complacent and they're not really in tune with what's happening. And I think just like accelerating that mindset and believing in yourself and believing in what we're building, I think that's powerful.
Love it. Y'all heard it first. And the whole developed world.
Yeah, I don't know why I said it. It's such a bullshit word. I think it
is bullshit. Balaji Srinivasan has a good mental model for this: is ascending world and descending world.
Yeah, that's a better. I like that framing better.
Honestly, like Canada.
No,
US,
we both left. So I mean, we're obviously biased. You know, we left the Canadian and the Swedish paradise. So you know,
come to Asia. Shit's better here.
This is good. Yeah.
Okay, buddy, brother. You've made it to the last segment. Thank you for, first of all, like even entertaining the idea of filming with me here today.
We've been trying to make this happen for a while. I'm glad we can make it happen. Yeah.
And like, thank you for like grinding up the staircases with me and trying to walk and talk at the same time. So I really appreciate your time. There's a good shot of the 101 here. So just want to say thank you. And then, did you have any last remarks for our viewers here before we close off this interview today?
Yeah, sure. So we'd love to sort of get your guys' help in terms of mapping out the ecosystem. So we have this public market map. If you work at an institution or you know something about business use cases, you can definitely contribute there. Maybe you have like a legal background, you can help out on that side as well in terms of like understanding and communicating the sort of legal framework that people operate under. And maybe you're like a builder in space and you want to talk about sort of the specific product that you're building that's relevant to this problem area, or maybe some research you're doing and stuff like that. There's like a lot of opportunities to contribute, and it's just open source. So you can go to IPTF.ethereum.org, and also the GitHub is like github.com/ethereum/IPTF-map, and contribute there. That's definitely one thing. And if you just want to know about like scenarios proofs and stuff, you can also check out my series of booklets. So ckintro.com. There might be some copies at DevConnect. We'll see what, not sure yet, but we'll see what happens there.
Where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, Oskar TH with a K on Twitter, and oskarth.com if you want to read more about things I've done. And
yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for your time. Yeah, we'll make our way down this little bump of a hill in Taipei. Okay, well, signing off, spreading the good word on good work in crypto, and Oskar is doing great work in crypto, so make sure to check him out. Yeah, thank you. And make sure to check him out on social media and zkintro.com and all of that good stuff. Signing off.
Cool.
Peace.